Dearest gentle viewers, I fear death is closing in upon me, withering away at my flesh bit by bit, day by day. With my faith in humanity gone, what more do I have to protect me from the sands of time licking away at my being? With my constitution so weakened, I am powerless to the torment. Why does my blood rush to tumult at just a few words, while they sit among the stars and I am dying on the brink of the grave? Emerald, why have you forsaken me?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did that moaning in the darkness make you uncomfortable? Well, now you know how I felt watching this film. Except I was gracious enough to save you the horror of discovering that that sound was actually coming from a hanging man. Following that, all of the people in the crowd becoming super horned up and mentioning his stiffy. Welcome to the Wuthering Heights video, something I've been working on for far too long. I've truly lost my mind at this point and I have nothing left in my brain except for Wuthering Heights. It is all that I can think about all day, every day. Don't ask me any other questions. I
cannot answer them.
Emerald, why have you forsaken me? I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I even had praise to bestow on some of your previous work. Not all of it, but some of it. I saw the merit, I saw the potential for this to be very good. I could see your vision. But instead of a thought-provoking piece that incorporated more sexuality than was present in the original, which I thought was what was going to happen, I got a horned-up flat portrayal of a rich and timeless text about abuse, trauma, racism, sexism. The list goes on and on. There's so many themes from the book that could have been incorporated, and we really got none of them. We got a love story about yearning. If that's what you wanted, take from anywhere else. Why did you have to pick this book? I wouldn't be here if you picked any other book. There's so many. Why did it have to be this one? Because now I am forced to talk about it. I'm forced to be the bitter bitch. Which I will. I will if I have to. I just didn't want to have to do it. When I was first watching this movie, I honestly was so bored for the first half that I was like, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. I had been preparing. As you can see, I devoured this book in a way that I've never devoured a book before because I wanted to really understand this story. My goal was to go in open-minded but informed. I was going to know what I was getting into, but even this did not prepare me because it wasn't the same thing. It wasn't until I got to Isabella's story that I decided that I had to make this because it was such a betrayal of the character. This depiction of her actually infuriated me. But that's what made me decide that I did have to make this. This is a feminist work that to this day fails to conform to what we expect a story to be. It is not a love story, and reducing it to such is such an oversimplification of its purpose. It is so widely known, but it is truly an unknowable story. There are so many different frameworks to use when discussing this. There are so many ways to go about it, and that's what makes it so beautiful and amazing. In the words of Sophia Alexandra Fraser, its poetry Miltonic, its style hyperbolic, and its cruelty relentless. It has left readers and scholars alike stumbling to locate its seemingly Delphic meaning as we try to make sense of the Hobbesian world it portrays. Basically, this book is deep. To understand this book, you must be knee-deep in the passenger seat. Emerald Fennell was fully clothed in the driver's seat. She could never truly understand it because she didn't even try. And yes, I know they put quotation marks around the name as to not hold themselves accountable for making a faithful adaptation. However, they still use the name. And that's my grounds, right? That's my grounds to go in on it so intensely. They didn't have to use the name. I like so many adaptations that don't use the name because they're not trying to be an exact adaptation. They are taking inspiration from. For example, Clueless. I fucking love Clueless. Is there a little bit of incest? Yes. But it's Paul Rudd's. Was that okay? There's also Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, a classic. Of course, Pride and Prejudice Zombies. That one does have the name, but the addition of zombies makes it different. And honestly, that is still a more faithful adaptation than this shit. The difference is they are not trying to be the original. With time changes, name changes, they are inspired by, but also intentionally departing from the original text. But something that they have in common is they are not a betrayal of the original text. They still have the guts. Extra guts if you're talking Pride and Prejudice Zombies. I could potentially understand this as being a fan fiction, wish fulfillment, an AO3 story to a certain degree. But why did they have to keep the name? Why were they intentionally trying to sell me Wuthering Heights? I truly do think it was just trying to rage bait me, and unfortunately it has worked.
Here I am.
But that being said, since they decided to use Wuthering Heights in the title, I will be judging it accordingly. I will be looking into it as Wuthering Heights. Now, I am not one to be 100% negative, so I will offer some praises for this movie. It was a beautiful and memorable film. The gowns, beautiful gowns, amazing gowns.
Great gowns, beautiful gowns.
Truly, I loved the costuming. I did not want it to be historically accurate. I thought that this interpretation was very, very fun. I loved the abstract dressing, and I even liked a lot of the abstract set dressing too. Some of the stuff was really weird. The skin wall, I don't think I liked the skin wall. I don't think Edgar would do a skin wall. Why are we making Edgar do a skin wall? That shit's weird. But I liked a lot of the costuming. The hand fireplace was also kind of cool. I was thinking about that. It was aesthetically very beautiful, but it seriously lacked substance. And listen, I'm by no means a film snob. I just made a video talking about how much I enjoyed FNAF 2. You think I'm a film snob? Absolutely not. I love some cheese, but I also love literature. And I think that respect needs to be paid to it. And I think that when you're talking about specific topics, you need to handle them with care and not just throw them out the window because this is what you read as a teenager in your head. This is what you made up in your head. Seriously, there are so many sexy forbidden love stories that could have been used instead. It's just so frustrating how this film was so beautifully shot and yet so reductive of the source material, and I just can't ignore it. But if you enjoyed this, I'm so happy for you. If I didn't know what was in this book, I would be such a happier person right now. Don't read this book if you liked it. Just be happy with it. Enjoy what it was. But if you too have read this book, or you're just curious, join me. We're going on a journey today. So what exactly am I talking about today? So I am gonna try to get a little bit
deeper
into the text. There are so many videos out there already reacting to this film, so I think a lot of base stuff has been covered. Casting was bad, the screenplay was kind of bad, it looked pretty good, some of the pacing was bad. I want to specifically talk about the source material and the characters and how the characters change from book to film. So we'll be comparing some scenes, we'll be talking about the characters' arcs. Basically, I've done the work of learning the texts, so you don't have to. If you decide to proceed with me any further into this video, one, know that there will be spoilers. This is the end of the spoiler-free section. We're diving right on in after this. And two, you are joining me in my pit of insanity, and there is no turning around. Okay, let's jump into it. Hello and welcome back to the forest, a place I come to discuss things that I really need time to think about. And think about Isabella, I truly have. This was one of the changes that really impacted me the most because she was always one of those characters that I was very intrigued by. And the more I researched her and her circumstances for this video, the more that became true. To be entirely honest, the changes made for her character made me a little bit sick the more I thought about it. And I have absolutely no issues with the Dom-sub dynamic. I think it can be done incredibly well when it is handled with care, which is not what I can say about this situation. And it just entirely changed Isabella's character and what her character means to the story. Isabella is one of those characters that often falls to the wayside when discussing this book in favor of the more tumultuous relationship between Catherine and Heathcliff. She's a little bit more quiet, reserved, and not as loud and aggressive, I guess, as they are. And she also doesn't have as much time in the book. But considering an entire chapter was dedicated to her and her letter, making her the narrator, it seems like she is a lot more important than she's often given credit for. And I really do think it's such a mistake because she is such an intriguing and tragic character, but also a character that is so full of strength. There's just so many different layers to her character, and I really do think it's a mistake to not include her in the conversations as much. I actually found an incredible article that I will be referencing in this section that is entirely dedicated to discussing Isabella's character, and it's so interesting. I really enjoyed reading it. And I was just so excited to finally see this baddie getting her flowers. She totally deserves it because she is not only important to showing the full extent of Heathcliff's abuse, she's also such a harrowing example of 1800s coverture laws and how that affected women's ability to have their own agency. I would like to establish one thing pretty early on. The relationship between Isabella and Heathcliff is abusive, it is toxic, it is exploitative, and it is even violent. That is something that cannot be made light of. That is just the facts. He uses her as a tool for revenge. That's the whole reason he marries her. He traps her in that fuck-ass haunted house. That's a crime in itself. He hangs her dog. Let's not forget that. That's very important. And that's why I also hate her being treated as a dog even more, because in the book he hangs her dog. And then she's a dog in the movie. What the fuck? I don't get that. He throws a knife at her. That's another thing. What the fuck? And also, when he eventually gains custody of their son, because he just owns everything, which means he just gets custody, even though he's a piece of shit, he just uses his son as a pawn to fuck with the Earnshaws once again. He is a piece of shit, and that cannot be understated, and that's why she is such an important character, because she solidifies that he is a piece of shit. We're standing up now because we're getting serious. The movie, in what I think is a failed attempt to make something sadomasochistic, paints her as a submissive conspirator who is okay being treated like a literal dog by Heathcliff, and that is kind of the extent of her character. She also has an obsession with Catherine. There really isn't a lot more to her. She is pretty much used as a punching bag almost, because one of the most harrowing and awful scenes in the book to me is treated as a joke because she's on the floor as a dog, and it's actually very upsetting, but we'll get there. It's just so frustrating to paint her abuse, which is precisely calculated by Heathcliff to not only perfectly torture her, tailors it to torture her specifically, but also just enough to not involve the authorities. Because as a man in the 1800s, the law is on his side. He can pretty much do anything, and they're like, that's fine, it's your wife, we don't really give a fuck, right? And also in the book, he does not ask permission to be an ass, he just is an ass. And also he doesn't really show his full ass until after the nuptials. So I think that that's also an important distinction. There wasn't all of this, are you okay if I'm terrible, do you consent, all of this stuff that they tried to throw into the movie to make it okay. I guess that was not present at all. With that, we must talk about the note. The note to me in the book is one of the most gut-wrenching parts of the whole thing. It is so sad and hard to read. It's just a scared teenage girl begging to know who the fuck, no, not who, what the fuck she married. She doesn't think that he is human. She does not understand what is happening. The note is also not written as a conspiracy with Heathcliff. It is written out of fear and concern. The most harrowing question to me that she asks in this letter is, Mr. Heathcliff a man? If so, is he mad? And if not, is he a devil? I shan't tell my reasons for making this inquiry, but I beseech you to explain, if you can, what I have married. Which to me is just so heartbreaking. And in this letter, she also tells Nelly multiple times not to tell Edgar and Catherine. She does not want to worry them, and she doesn't want to involve them because she knows that's exactly what Heathcliff wants, and she does not want to give him what he wants. You can also tell in this letter that she is just very frustrated with herself. She feels foolish, she feels duped, and she just doesn't know what else to do. She is now trapped inside this marriage, which we'll get into why she can't just simply leave. It's not as easy as that. And she ends it with, I do hate him, I am wretched, I have been fooled. And then finally, beware of uttering one breath of this to anyone at the Grange. I shall expect you every day, don't disappoint me. She feels fooled, she doesn't want anyone to know, but she just needs Nelly. She needs somebody to be there for her. And that is her final plea within this letter. And directly after this letter, the next chapter is Heathcliff's side of the story. And I think that that was done very intentionally. So we have the woman's perspective, and then directly after, we have a man coming in and spilling all of this manipulation, and we are supposed to question it. And I think that's very important to remember, the placement of these two things. And the conversation between Heathcliff and Nelly honestly has a similar verbiage to how it goes in the movie, but the context is entirely different. In the movie, it's played at as almost jokingly, since Isabella is literally chained to the floor the whole time, and used to justify Heathcliff's behavior by saying that she knew what she was getting into and that she likes it, which is not my girl's story at all. So first of all, we're meant to question it. This is directly after her own letter, so we're supposed to already be like, I don't know if we can fully trust what he's saying, right? Second of all, there is a very important part of the conversation that was cut in the movie where she talks about why she wants to stay. And it's not because she likes it, it's because she too is a vengeful fuck. Everyone in this book is vengeful. That's a common thread for all of the characters. They have all been abused so much in their lives and have all of this generational trauma that just keeps on passing through. So she too is vengeful. She also very much wants to protect Edgar. She does not want Heathcliff to get what he wants. And from the text, she says, he has married me on purpose to obtain power over him, and he shan't obtain it. I will die first. The single pleasure I can imagine is to die or see him dead. Those are not the words of the submissive girly we saw in the movie. Those are the words of a vengeful woman, and I am just so sad that we didn't get that in the film, because I also think that the actress could have delivered that so well, and it's very disappointing to me. So back to the combo. Gist is, Heathcliff, manipulative ass, he's just trying to get to Catherine. He spends most of the discussion talking about Catherine, actually complaining, saying that Edgar will never love Cathy like I do. I am the best for her. Bah. Nelly calls him out for this, saying that he is obviously lacking love for Isabella, to which he says, I should guess it was her own. She degenerates into a mere slut. She is tired of trying to please me uncommonly early. You'd hardly credit it, but the very morrow of our wedding, she was weeping to go home. I'll take care she does not disgrace me by rambling abroad. Oh, That's nice. That's lovely. And I have seen some discussions online using this part of the scene specifically as proof that Isabella was in on it, right? This was submissive dom situation. Maybe she was enjoying herself. But to me, with historical context, this reads quite differently. This reads very icky, is the only way to put that. Because the fact that women were basically seen as property is something that cannot be ignored when talking about this scene. Content warning, I will be briefly discussing sexual violence, so if that's not for you, please skip ahead. But I do think that it is necessary when discussing this relationship. This quote from Judith Pike's article, My Name is Isabella Linton, Coverture, Domestic Violence, and Mr. Heathcliff's Narrative in Wuthering Heights, really sums up a lot of what I'm thinking. Under the common law, a wife was in many ways regarded as property of her husband. The common law doctrine of coverture dictated that when women married, their legal personality was subsumed in that of her husband. If a husband and wife were one body, that body was represented by the husband. With all of the beautiful visuals, the incredible score, and of course, Jacob Elordi, I think we have all forgotten what Isabella's story is really about. A scared teenager trapped in an abusive relationship, which she has no means of escaping because she is seen as property. This is because prior to the Divorce Act of 1857, the only way to end a marriage other than by annulment was by a private act of parliament. So nearly impossible. That's why bitches at the time were making their own churches to get annulments. That's how difficult it was. And those were men. Women were trapped. And even when the issue was discussed by the House of the Lords while determining what things could constitute a divorce, according to Feminism, Marriage, and the Law of Victorian England by Mary Lyndon, from a list that included rape, sodomy, desertion, transportation, penile servitude, incest, bigamy, and cruelty, they accepted only the last three, indicating that they did not regard crimes of sexual violence or prolonged absence by the husband as fatal to the marriage bond. Sexual violence within marriage was not even considered by the Lords. A husband had the right of access to his wife's body and by definition could not be charged with marital rape. This historical context makes it very difficult for me to accept Fennell's explanation of sadomasochism due to the power imbalance, especially present at the time, making true consent very unlikely. It's also just not present in the book at all. This was all added for the film. And I would also like to take a moment to define sadomasochism so we can accurately judge whether or not it is a successful expansion of the text or not. So it can be defined as taking of pleasure, often sexual in nature, from inflicting or suffering of pain, hardship, or humiliation. The infliction of pain leads to sexual pleasure, while the simulation of violence can serve to express and consolidate attachment. Indeed, sadomasochistic activities are often initiated at the request and for the benefit of the masochist, who directs activities through subtle cues. Sensual sadomasochism should not be confused with acts of sexual aggression. The problem for me with accepting this relationship as sadomasochistic is, one, Isabella is inexperienced. That is something that they do talk about in the movie. He specifically says, do you know anything about this? Something like that. And she just also looks so young, so it's just hard to watch. He just looks so young and he looks clearly 30, so it just makes it even worse. I think they're supposed to be about the same age, so I guess it's fine. I don't know. But the second and most important thing is her social standing. That context is so important. Deserting a marriage at the time was essentially impossible. Women could not own property. Women's earnings from jobs went to their husband. If a woman had child, their child would automatically be given to the husband. And the men were also protected by the law and could even have the woman given back to them, essentially. They could take back their property. And if women were able to find jobs outside of the marriage and actually keep their own earnings, very hard to make a living on that because they were not paid the same wage, even a little bit. And Heathcliff is very aware of this. He does specifically state, I keep strictly within the limits of the law. I have avoided up to this period of giving her the slightest right to claim separation. He knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. From Judith Pike, she says, Heathcliff's argument acts as a carefully crafted legal rationale based upon the laws of coverture to defend and sanction the domestic confinement of his wife. While the laws of coverture culture, deprived woman of legal and economic voice, Bronte endows Isabella with a complex and at times ironic voice. Bronte paints a powerful portrait of the radical transformation of Isabella from pampered and infantile Mrs. Linton to the hardened Mrs. Heathcliff, ending with her as an intrepid fugitive wife. Isabella Heathcliff. Bronte demonstrates through Isabella's story that as long as the laws of coverture are intact, compassionate marriage is at risk of being exploited and compromised. Which perfectly leads me into the next thing I want to talk about. The film's depiction takes away everything that makes her a strong, interesting, and vengeful character. It's all of the things that make her part of this story of vengeance. She is aware of her situation, and she is playing ball just as much as any of the other characters.
Max, what do you want for dinner?
And taking that away from her is basically a character assassination. She has a shit list, just like everyone else. Maybe there's only one name on her shit list, Heathcliff, but she does have one, and she deserves to be recognized for it. I think her strength and power really shines during her interaction with Nelly. She flat out says, Heathcliff is a liar, a monster, and is very aware of his plot to obtain power over Edgar. And instead of relenting to save herself, she, one, wants to protect Edgar. That's her brother. She's looking out a little bit, but she specifically says not to tell anyone that she would rather die than let Heathcliff have power, and her single pleasure would be to either die or see him die. And this desire for violence is born out of revenge, not masochistic tendencies. Then, after this little outburst of hers, she is forcibly removed by Heathcliff, and when I say I mean forcibly, and he says, I have no pity, I have no pity. The more the worms writhe, the more I yearn to crush out their entrails. Chapter 13 and 14 are at odds with one another, and it is basically up to the reader to decide whether you believe the established manipulator and narcissist, or if you believe the naive 18-year-old who fell in love with the wrong guy. I think it's clear who Emerald Fennell chose to side with in this. I'm definitely not an expert in this topic, but I find her reserved strength to be something very admirable, and her own commitment to revenge is so inspired and so ahead of its time. Her willingness to leave and be at risk of ruin rather than asking for help from her brother and giving Heathcliff exactly what he wants is true strength. It really is. Isabella's story could be its own video, and I struggled to even cut this down to what I have now, which I already think this part is probably the longest section, but it just had to be talked about. Maybe I'll talk about it more in the future. I don't know. It's honestly hard to think about because it just makes me sad thinking about what was done to her character and the implications of that. Eee, fun! They just stripped all of the nuance away in favor of shock value and I guess the meme of being hot man Jacob Elordi's dog. Woof woof. What the fuck? Moving on, I guess.
You had a temper, bad dreams in the night. You told me
Nothing represents the constant and ghostly presence of Catherine better than Kate Bush. This song is so incredible, and I never stop singing its praises. It's one of those songs that I always go back to because it's just so powerful, and it's not even just a song I like to listen to when I'm thinking about this book. It's just a great song. It's like one of my cry in the car songs. One time I drove 2 hours while crying just listening to this song. Just so good. It really makes me feel all the emotions. But it does also just capture this book so well, and it is crazy that a 3-minute song captures the relationship between Catherine and Heathcliff better than a 2-hour film does. It's really interesting. Can't quite figure that one out. Because one of my biggest confusions when watching this movie was, where the fuck is the ghost shit? When I initially read this book in high school, it was sold to me as a ghost story. Now, was that entirely true? No. That was very much an overstatement of the amount of ghostly activity that takes place. There's really hardly any true ghost shit that takes place, but there is haunting elements. Most of those are figuratively, but there are some real ghost moments as well. That is a big selling point for the story.
And none of that to be present was so disappointing for me. And that is why I decided to dress for a funeral in this section, because I am mourning the loss of my ghost shit. Speaking of ghost shit, what the fuck? There's something in my closet. The haunting of Catherine is something that plagues the entire story, both as a literal specter that appears to some of the characters, but mostly in the memory of those that knew her, specifically Heathcliff. And Nelly to an extent as well, but Heathcliff, oh, he's never getting over her. To death do those two part. But even then, not really. Those two are toxic till the end. Heathcliff describes this haunting many times throughout the book, but one of the best examples is from the ending where he says, "I am surrounded with her image. The entire world is a dreadful collection of memoranda that she did exist and that I have lost her." And then he goes on to describe some of these images and also his own suffering. He never gets over Catherine, and he spends the rest of his days taking revenge on everybody. Anyone involved with her, anyone that may have contributed to them being apart. It doesn't matter if they are at all connected, they are not safe from his wrath. And in the end, this haunting is also insinuated to be part of how he meets his ultimate demise, or at the very least, she accompanies him till the end. Additionally, Heathcliff haunts Kathy as well. The whole time he's gone, the whole time she's sick, he is just always present in her mind, because the two are undeniably linked. This is firmly established during Kathy's conversation with Nelly, where she famously says, "He's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And Linton's is as different as a moonbeam from lightning or frost from fire." These two are truly connected by a force stronger than nature. No one, especially in their lives, will ever understand. And I do like the ending of this quote too, where she talks about Edgar just being vastly different from herself. She definitely has this strong admiration for him, but she will never be free of Heathcliff, and that's something that she realizes. She can never love Edgar or be drawn and attached to Edgar the same way that she is to Heathcliff, because their souls are just the same. It's like looking in a mirror. Heathcliff is almost a representation of her true nature that she has to suppress in order to be with Edgar. That being said, let's discuss her characterization in the movie. She honestly lost a lot of her agency, and it was stripped down in order to make her more appealing. She comes off as more of a victim of circumstance, which is truly a disservice to her. She knows what the fuck is up. You're gonna tell me the woman that willed her own death out of spite didn't create her own path in life? Maybe she regrets some of her decisions, but she was making those decisions, and I hate to see that she wasn't in control. Because yes, she had to make these decisions to marry Edgar for money, but in the book, they do genuinely have a friendship and maybe a love. It's hard to tell if she actually loves him or if she just has this deep admiration for her. It's clear she loves Heathcliff, but it's a little bit more love triangle-y. There's definitely more of a kinship and relationship with her and Edgar, and that's something that I did miss from the movie as well. Her softening just really removes that tension between her and Edgar, because she spends the entire relationship attempting to hide her darkness from him. A perfect example of this in the book is after she pinches Nelly, very violently and spitefully, might I add. She is caught by Edgar, and she tries to lie about it, and he was standing right there, which I think is very funny. And this act totally destroys the perfect vision of her that he had had. I actually like Nelly's quote in here where she says, "Linton was greatly shocked at the double fault of falsehood and violence which his idol had committed." He's just standing there like, "Oh, not my girl, what?" And then because she's throwing a tantrum and she's just embarrassed and angry at what had happened, poor little Hareton, who's a kid at the time, takes the brunt of this, and she ends up shaking the shit out of him because he just happens to be standing there. And then Edgar's like, "Hey girl, don't do that." And she bops his ass in the face. And this is talking about one of her hands. In an instant, one was wrung free, and the astonished young man felt it applied over his own ear in a way that could not be mistaken for jest. Could not. And he, of course, is like shooketh by this. And he's like, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna leave. And she's like, why? And he says, can I stay after you struck me? And then, of course, Kathy's like, don't. If you go, I'll cry myself sick. Which should have been a warning for things to come. You would think, to our boy Edgar, this would have been a red flag. Absolutely not. This actually brings the two closer. This is the thing that really drove them together as a couple. It was a moment of them both tearing up the walls that they had built and seeing each other where they were truly at. Honestly, hey ladies, if he can't love you at your shaking a child and then slapping him in the face, he can't love you, right? Just kidding, don't do that. If anyone does that, that's bad. That's a red flag. This is a dark romance, okay? It's part of it. This is, however, extremely disappointing in the movie. Because movie Kathy's mask slip is less her showing her ass to him and more him finding out that her father is an alcoholic. Boring. We all knew that. This is not new information. But finding out that she herself is a little bit more unhinged, now that's interesting. Finding out her father is an alcoholic, that just reduces her to being the victim again. And once again, strips her away and takes away some of her agency. Hate to see it. Also, Book Linton does not react the same way as movie Linton. Book Linton, he runs the fuck home. And he's so valid for that because there's some extreme violence that follows drunkenly coming home, so good for you. I would get the fuck out of there too. Listen, if I see a household hiding their guns and locking themselves in their rooms to avoid this man because he's drunk, I would get the fuck out too. That's not a place for me. I did like how the film showed Isabella's growing indignation towards Catherine and Heathcliff's relationship. This is something that's super important to explain why Isabella ends up with Heathcliff, except they start out well and they drop the ball with it, which I'll explain. First of all, there's a big difference between book Isabella and movie Isabella. In the movie, she's infantilized and has this weird obsession with Catherine, which I don't quite understand. But don't get me started on Isabella again. Truly the most infuriating thing ever. We have to talk about her a little bit, so I'm going to try not to get too distracted. But her relationship with Catherine is something that's like really glazed over in the film. It's not really addressed, and that's disappointing because in the book they actually have a friendship. They also have known each other since childhood, like Heathcliff, Edgar. Isabella was there the whole time. So when the shit with Heathcliff eventually does go down, it really feels more of a betrayal. Catherine is presumed as hogging him. And you know what? She handles it bad. Catherine is very much a bitch in this situation. So the first instance where this is brought up is after Catherine and Isabella had gone to hang out with Heathcliff. And Isabella's like, hey, you were being a man hog. And you know what? How Catherine responds? A very mature answer. Absolutely. It was no hint that your company was superfluous. We didn't care whether you kept with us or not. And then Isabella responds, you wished me away because you knew I liked to be there. And then later on, I love him more than you loved Edgar, and he might love me if you let him. And Catherine does also call her an idiotic little monkey during this exchange. So it does feel like she is low-key pushing her more towards him. She does say that it's crazy that Isabella sees him as an admirable person, but the way that she goes about it really does give jealousy. So it made it hard for Isabella to take any of this advice for real. Later on, Kathy does fully eggs this relationship on just a few pages later in the interaction with her and Isabella in the library. This whole interaction is so high school and I hate it so much, but also it really shows off Catherine's devious side in such a perfect way. Basically, she outs Isabella and is like, she has a crush on you. I heard her earlier saying she swears that the love Edgar Edgar has for me is nothing to that she entertains for you. Don't tell him that. What? I would be mortified if I was Isabella. She tries to run away. Catherine grabs her arm like a little serpent and she's like, no, stay. We have more to discuss. It's crazy. This was just a little crush on Isabella's behalf. I feel like she would have forgotten in a couple days. Nelly says the same shit, which I love. Me and her, we're always connected. But she says, whether she would have gotten over this fancy if left to herself or preserved and nursing it perpetually, I cannot say. She had little time to reflect. Who knows? But this really does show Catherine egging on this relationship and not really trying to protect her. She wants to paint it out that way, but in reality, this is all to just instigate Heathcliff, which is proven because the page after, there's a conversation between her and Heathcliff, which I actually love this conversation. I think it does foreshadowing super duper well, and it's a very good picture of these two characters and their perceived control that they have over the other and also the people around them. So they're laughing the whole thing off, whatever. And then Isabella says, I like her too well, my dear Heathcliff, to let you absolutely seize and devour her up. He follows with, and I like her to attempt it, except in a very ghoulish fashion. You'd hear of odd things if I lived alone with that mawkish waxen face. He then asks Catherine whether or not Isabella is Edgar's heir or not, which she is, and then she responds, abstract your mind from the subject at present. You are too prone to covet thy neighbor's goods. Remember this, neighbor's goods are mine. And he responds, if they were mine, they would be none the less that. But though Isabella Linton may be silly, she is scarcely mad, and in short will dismiss the matter as you advise. And they did. They dismissed it for now. But throughout the evening, you see his gears turning. He's not letting this go. This has given him a very diabolical idea. And something about Heathcliff is he will do the most diabolical thing possible just because he can. And we have already talked about Isabella, so unfortunately we all know how this ends up going. My poor girl. She deserved better. We do get this conversation in the film, but it doesn't have the same weight as it does in the book, unfortunately, and there's some things cut out. So it ends up being a little bit disappointing to me, which is sad because this for me is just one of the most interesting interactions and really shows the nature of these characters super duper well. And I definitely missed it. And in the movie, there was also a lot of depth missing from both of their quests for revenge. They both spell it out very plainly through their banter throughout the book. And I just wanted more of that, like this type of conversation, because it really does add to the haunting aspect of these figures that's always present, even if they're not on screen or even if they're dead. Which leads me to the end of the movie, where she just kind of dies, loses the baby, the end. This is just so frustrating, not only because to me, it's only the beginning of this journey, but if I'm to look at this from the point of view that there just isn't enough time to tell the entire book, fine. It still needs to end with at least the idea that Catherine is still present. So her daughter still needs to be alive. That needs to be a presence that's established, and maybe Heathcliff has a vision of her. I don't know. There needs to be a different way of showing that this is not over. The way that the movie ended was just like, this is over. That's it. Boring. It also just takes away one of my favorite quotes, and also I think one of the funniest quotes in the whole book that Heathcliff says to Catherine. So he says, Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then, bitch. He doesn't say bitch, but it really feels like a bitch moment. He doesn't say bitch though. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. Ask and you shall receive. His ass does get haunted, and I think that that's beautiful. I love pettiness. Pettiness from beyond the grave. That's what we need more of. It's just so good. And removing the haunting aspect takes away from this. This is what this story is all about. Being petty bitches. I would also just like to briefly touch one more time on Edgar and Nelly in regards to Catherine. So in the film, she meets Edgar as an adult woman, and she is pretty much just marrying him out of necessity, and we don't really get to build that tension of them actually being childhood friends and having some type of actual romantic relationship. And since Edgar is Heathcliff's foil, it's fun to compare the two in regards to their feelings and relationship with Catherine, because one of Edgar's downfalls is that he is pretty self-absorbed. He grew up very wealthy, he grew up spoiled, so he has a lot of self-absorption that leads to his own downfall a little bit. So in the end, when Catherine gets sick, the movie wants to simplify this to be all being Nelly's fault, which I really hate. You can't just pin all of this on Nelly. Yes, maybe she should have told him sooner, but he wasn't super interested in what was going on. Also, Catherine had literally told her that she was gonna will herself to death. So Nelly's like, whatever, you're gonna make yourself die just despite these men, whatever. He didn't believe her, all right, understandable. But also, Edgar is a full-grown man. If he wasn't so self-absorbed and honestly licking his own wounds in the library, he would have gone and checked on her. So I think that that's where his self-absorption really shows, is in that moment where he waited so long to even go and check up on her, because he was also hurt by the situation and he was hiding away in his library. Because really what was happening, they were both throwing their own little tantrums and were prideful till the bitter end. Overall, Kathy's characterization in this movie is very disappointing for me because she's just such an interesting character. Is she an antagonist? Is she a protagonist? Truly, I think she's somewhere in the middle. I don't think she is the worst in the book, but I also don't think that she is a perfect baby girl angel. That's okay. That's why I like her so much as a character. It makes her very interesting. And she just fell a little flat in the movie. They took away a lot of her agency in order to make her look better, but I really do think that it just ends up making her look worse. And I wanted her to get her haunting moment. My girl's a ghost. Let her be a ghost. I guess just stream Kate Bush and get your fill.
Out of the windy moor.
And now we discuss the absolute assassination and vilification of my girl Nelly. She deserved better, and we're going to talk about it because she is an absolute diva. Does she like a little mess? Is she a gossip? Yes, she is also a very unreliable narrator, but that's what makes her so fun. She is like me for real when she tells a story. She's got to embellish a little bit, make it sound a little bit better, maybe make herself sound a little bit better. She's just having a good time. Honestly, if she was alive today, she would have a podcast and absolutely love those college apps where you just go on and spread the craziest gossip about everyone. But my girl, she would be on there. To me though, she really does give Y2K diva. She'd have a flip phone. She'd be texting everybody in the school, send group messages all the time. And when she got home, she would be IMing people, updating her MySpace status just to cause issues. It would be iconic. And her mess is what makes her, to me, one of the most interesting characters. She also is so real, because if I worked for these crazy ass bitches, you bet your bottom dollar I would be spreading all of their gossip. Especially because some of it's so crazy. I'm just gonna keep that to myself? Absolutely not. The second anybody asked me anything, I would be the same. I'd be like, let me tell you about it. Sit down. Let me tell you a tale. But all jokes aside, she is a character that I don't think was represented very well within the movie. They just really tried to pin all of the blame for everything on her, which I thought was such a mistake, because leaving the blame more ambiguous and not truly having a single antagonist is what makes this story so good. I just love a book that doesn't have any likable characters. But this section was the hardest part for me to write, because in my research, I discovered that many interpretations of the text differ from my own. And it kind of stressed me out a little bit because I'm not a literature major. So sometimes I get in my head, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm the one that's totally misreading this. I have no clue what's going on.
Am I dumb.
But then I had to remind myself, this is, at the end of the day, my interpretation. If you disagree, awesome. Let's talk about it. That's what literature is all about. The story is meant to be read and reread so many different ways. So what I was seeing online was a lot of people coming to the conclusion from the book, even, that Nelly was indeed the villain. And I agree that she has some villainistic moments. I don't believe that they in any way outshine that of those around her. They all are out there doing villain shit. Because at the end of the day, this is a story of cyclical abuse. No character is truly free of guilt. Even young Kathy and Harriton, who are arguably some of the best behaved characters, still have their own problems. What makes the story so human is how you can track the root of that so-called evil, because all of these characters are so fleshed out. It's very impressive how many characters she was able to flesh out within one book. So while I was researching, I found a lot of interpretations that, in my opinion, fail to give Nelly the same grace that they give to other characters like Heathcliff. Because yes, she does some things, but he is arguably worse. But her biggest issue is she is the narrator. So she has that added pressure of being the narrator. And she is absolutely an unreliable narrator. So that really does make her look bad. And she's a gossip. She can be a manipulator. However, I do think it's important to remember that she is a servant to some of the most irritating people ever. She is part of the main cast. However, her station always keeps her separate from the others, and additionally gives her less agency over her own situation. She is also really close in age to Heathcliff and Catherine, which is something I also think is forgotten about, because she's only like 6 years older than them. So she really was a parentified child, forced to take care of these other children who were not the best behaved. Let's just put it like that. And of course, all of these children were subjected to so much abuse from their alcoholic parental figure, Hindley. Let's be honest, she was taking care of everybody more than Hindley ever did. And that's a lot of pressure to put on her. I think she's 15 when all of that fell on her, and she had no choice in the matter. And speaking of Hindley, aka Mr. Earnshaw from the movie, because they just kind of combined those two characters. So the abusive father figure within Wuthering Heights, he is so much worse than how they portray him in the movie. In the movie, he's an alcoholic, yells, and like, okay, whatever. But in the book, he's actually scary, to the point where they lock their doors, they hide the baby from him because he can't be trusted. And the one time that they're not able to hide the baby fully, he throws it over the banister. Poor little Harriton's flying through the air. What the fuck did Harriton do? That's crazy. There's also an instance where he comes home super duper drunk and he threatens to make her swallow a carving knife, which is horrible. But because my girl is a little morbid and a little bit of an antagonizer, she retorts in the funniest way possible.
I don't like the carving knife, Mr. Hindley. It has been cutting red herrings. I'd rather be shot, if you please.
I'm sorry, that joke is just so Gen Z. How the fuck was this written almost 200 years ago? It's not funny because it's a horrifying experience, but also that scene also perfectly captures the dark and morbid humor that is present within this book. She's also not always treated kindly by Catherine and Heathcliff, specifically Catherine, because in Heathcliff's case, I kind of give him a pass when they're children, because Nelly wasn't always the nicest to him. So, you know, they had beef from the beginning. Catherine just is to be a brat sometimes. In addition to verbally talking down to Nelly or just being outright cruel, she also can be physical. There is one scene in particular where she viciously pinches Nelly's arm, and instead of actually having consequences for this, it ends up pushing her and Edgar closer as a couple, which is crazy. He's at first mortified. He's like, don't treat people like that. But then he's like, it's fine. But he gets over it very quickly. Despite all of this, Catherine and Nelly have a very tumultuous relationship. At the end of the day, Nelly does care for her. It might be a little bit of a messed up bond, but she really does listen to her and have a lot of empathy for her. But she does not feed into Catherine's delusions, which is something that she really needs. She does not need a yes man next to her. She needs somebody that is going to banter with her and tell her when she's being a little crazy. And I think one of the best examples of this is in the conversation where Catherine and Nelly are talking about why Catherine can't be with Heathcliff. And of course, Nelly has a little bit of snark to add before, she's going to actually give some advice. So Catherine is being all dramatic and she's like,
Nelly, if I were in heaven, I would be miserable there.
And Nelly's like, because you're not fit to go there? All sinners would be miserable in heaven. Damn, that's funny. And then Catherine goes on talking about how she loves Heathcliff, but she has to marry Edgar because of the money and the status, but she would use said status to help bring Heathcliff up. But Nelly has to kind of talk some sense into her. She's like, hey, with your husband's money, girl, that's not going to work. He's not just going to be like, oh, yes, of course, please bring your brother boyfriend with you. Yes, of course. No, he's not going to go for that. And then, of course, that scene does lead into a scene from the movie where they really tweaked it to make her appear more villainous than she really is. So in the movie, she calls Heathcliff, signals to Heathcliff to come and listen to the conversation. So he catches the part where she says it would degrade her to marry Heathcliff. In the book, she notices that he had been there. It's not as malicious. She just doesn't say anything. But I honestly just think she's being a realist in this moment.
First things first, I'm the realist.
In her eyes, it's better for both of them to just not be together. Heathcliff doesn't deserve to be a side bitch, and Catherine deserves to have an opportunity to better herself, because as a woman at the time, she didn't really have any other option in way of bettering herself and providing for herself. Heathcliff, he was able to go off and make his own fortune. That same possibility is not extended to Catherine. Marrying Edgar, her only chance. So Nelly's aware of this and she just doesn't tell him. And it kind of makes sense, but it wasn't as malicious as like calling him over like, hey, come listen to this. It happened and she just didn't say anything. There's also a relationship with Heathcliff, which is very tumultuous, and she has her obvious issues with him, but also you can tell that she does have some type of a soft spot for him, even when they are younger, and she is constantly complaining about him, trying to other him, and just overall not a fan. She starts to soften over time as she starts to get to know him. She has an internal dialogue where she's questioning whether or not her treatment of him is fair. Does she still treat him like shit a lot? Absolutely. And that is something that cannot be ignored. And one thing that she doesn't stand for is other people treating him like that. So for example, when he first returns, there's a moment where Edgar is referring to him as a slur and trying to get him to eat in the kitchen because he doesn't want him in the main dining room because he doesn't see him as worthy. And Nelly shuts that down real quick. She called him by his name, first of all, and then Catherine comes in like, and he's eating in the dining room, what the fuck? So that's cool. But that being said, this is all things that were told through her own narration. All of her moments of having remorse for treating him coldly, a lot of that is within her own narration. So it's unclear whether this is just to make herself look better or not. There are still some moments where she gives him a little bit of grace, even though she has growing disapproval of it. But back to the movie. They pretty much just use Nelly to tie up all of their loose ends. So Nelly's the one that made Heathcliff listen to the conversation, so he leaves. Nelly's the one that didn't take care of Catherine and alert everybody, so Catherine died. It's just an oversimplification of these events to just try to pin it on one person. But the conversation, that's not necessarily how that goes. Everything with Catherine, we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. But everything with Catherine is pretty self-inflicted on Catherine's part. Like, she wills herself to die essentially. And then Edgar is pretty self-absorbed, so he doesn't try to reach out to her. And Nelly's just doing the best she can. She doesn't know how to read the situation. So to put all of the blame on her it's just an oversimplification. The way Nelly is handled is extra frustrating because there's an interview that Emerald Fennell did where it's clear that she understands this character. and just failed to portray her correctly in the final cut.
Were you mindful of like not making her the villain of the story? Nelly is such an interesting character in the book. She is the narrator. She claims, like all good novel narrators, to be sort of innocent bystander, and yet seems to affect every single thing that happens in the book. And there's that amazing piece of scholarship from the 50s, which is sort of Nelly Dean is the real villain of Wuthering Heights. I don't believe that. I don't believe there are any, I mean, there's villainous behaviour, but the thing that's so brilliant about Bronte, she's radically amoral. Nelly, I'll bring her into the kind of like workings of the house in a more interesting way to make her more of a sister to Cathy, is this kind of mothery sister character. And I think we all can relate to that person when you're the sensible one and you're the one who can see that something is a terrible idea. And you're the one, perhaps in Nelly's case, who doesn't have as much power. I get it. I get why she does the things she does, because looking at what's happened, but also the moment to give her that moment of grace at the end, when she realizes she has been responsible, is really important.
She understands that Nelly is not outwardly the villain, and yet that's how it's portrayed in the movie. Very reminiscent of Saltburn, where the movie basically sides with the bourgeoisie against the evil proletariat who is set on destroying them and taking all of their wealth. That is kind of how that came across to me. And it just totally ignores the class struggle that is ever present within the novel. That's something that's kind of erased in the movie. We're really not talking about the class differences of these people. We're shown it a little bit through the wealth that's present at the Lintons estate versus the poor that's present at Wuthering Heights, but not really to the extent that it's an engaging commentary on the topic. My poor girl is truly just not paid enough to have all of this put on her shoulders. Come on now. So basically, what I get from this movie is rich people suffer because the poor people want to destroy them. They're just so jealous. All of you plebes just want to be us so bad. And I can accept that when there's a naked dance scene at the end, but I didn't get a naked dance scene in this movie, so I can't accept that. Sorry. What do you have to add? Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. I actually loved this film because she just thinks Jacob Elordi's hot, and that's all she wanted. So I'm happy for her. I'm so happy that that was her journey. Girl, you can't say that on the internet. Oh my god, rein it in, rein it in. And now it is time for me to answer one of the questions I had going into this research. Is this movie a departure from or a betrayal of the text? So we've already talked about a lot of reasons why it seems like a betrayal. We're going to go through a few more points and then come to a final conclusion. So one thing I will give this film credit for is being absolutely beautiful. It is such a stunning film, cinematography, amazing. And overall, sets I thought were really cool. They were more surrealist and fantastical, but I thought that that was really fun in most cases, except for the damn beer bottle stacked up. That shit was so corny. There was a lot of plastic, which was kind of confusing, but you know what? Overall, it looked great. And number one thing that I did like was the depiction of the Moors. And when I'm thinking of the Moors as described in the text, it is an imposing space of solitude and stillness that is overwhelming and desolate. It is large, it is lonely, it is the perfect setting for any Gothic novel. And a poem that I really like that describes this super well is by Sylvia Plath, because that girl got it. She had the right flavor of pessimism and melancholy to truly understand this novel. You gotta have that right level to really understand how to depict it. She just gets it. What's really funny, her husband, who was a real piece of work, don't even get me started on fucking Ted. Of course he is, though. His name is Ted. What do we expect? Anyways, he also wrote a poem about Wuthering Heights, but it was just like, I don't know. To me, he doesn't get it. It's too warm. It's not the right vibe. So not everybody gets it, but the girls that get it, they get it. So Plath's depiction is very much that loneliness, that desolateness, and then she also describes it as like a fortress of solitude, which I really enjoy. I will read just a little excerpt out of it. So this is her specifically talking about the wind. Pours by like destiny, bending everything in one direction. I can feel it trying to funnel my heat away. If I pay the roots of the heather too close attention, they will invite me to whiten my bones among them. Oh, I just love that within this poem, the wind is its own character. It is an imposing force that is almost luring in a way. It just feels reminiscent of the novel, how it is a very desolate and destructive place, but it still has this allure, this mystery, this need to be a part of. The whole time Kathy is away, she talks about going home. There's just something so magnetic about this place, and it draws them back despite them knowing the risks, the dangers. And while on the surface level, the movie depicts the moors very well, I think it misses a little bit of this allurement to the place itself. Kathy has a lot of yearning for Heathcliff, right? But it's missing her also loving Wuthering Heights. There's something about Wuthering Heights that just enamors her, and she wants to return there for Heathcliff, of course, but there's also something about the place. And overall, aesthetically, it looked really good, and I think it did capture that isolation and dreariness pretty well. And when talking about betrayal of the text, it is pertinent that we discuss a white man.
A white man? No!
We must discuss Heathcliff. Casting Heathcliff as a white man, I think, is a betrayal. His whole character is built upon his race and his class. Taking that away makes him a different character entirely. I didn't give Heathcliff his own section in this video, mostly because I hate that bitch, and that's exactly what he would have wanted. And I refuse to give him what he wants. I'm just kidding. I think he's a very interesting character. Does he piss me off a lot? Yes, but that's the whole point. The real reason is there are already so many amazing creators that have done videos discussing the importance of Heathcliff's race and more about his character in general. So I will link those below, but I will add that it is impossible to successfully depict this character ignoring race and class. Bloody earring or not, this is not Heathcliff. The writing overall for his character in the movie just wasn't very good. He wasn't even dark and gritty enough to be Heathcliff. Honestly, Nate Jacobs is more reminiscent of Heathcliff than Jacob Elordi is in this role as Heathcliff. And it's sad because we've seen him play this abusive ass before, so we know that he has the capability of doing it, and he just wasn't given the opportunity to do that in this role. Also, going back to race, don't even try to play with me and try to convince me that the race was ambiguous. Most of these sticky notes that are about Heathcliff are about him being degraded because he is considered a slur and or is darker than everyone else. How he wished he looked like Edgar, and if he looked like Edgar, his life would be so much better. Okay, so don't fucking play with me, okay? I don't want to play these games, all right? But back to Jacob Elordi, I think the problem is he's become too much of a heartthrob, and they were just never going to let him be as bad as he needed to be for this role. The same thing happened in Frankenstein. I didn't fully hate the Frankenstein movie. It wasn't the same. I had a lot of the similar gripes of the oversimplification of the plot and the smoothing of the characters. No surprise there. They casted two hot heartthrobs to play the main villains. Of course they weren't going to be that bad. You know, we're not talking about Frankenstein today, but just a similar thing happened. He wasn't allowed to be as bad because he's heartthrob now, whatever. We already had a whole section dedicated to Catherine, but just overall, both of these characters just feel like shells of themselves. These are two characters that constantly show their asses. They are just always showing the absolute worst sides of themselves, but that's what makes them fun. And I didn't get as much of that from the movie. It was very disappointing. There was the egg thing. I still don't really understand the egg thing. That's not from the book at all. Maybe though. Maybe it's like meta humor. Hear me out. The eggs in the bed are meant to represent them both constantly having egg on their face. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm trying to add justification. I didn't understand it, but the overall lack of assery behavior is just very disappointing. This movie was just way too concerned with convincing us that it was a love story instead of the much darker and intriguing depiction of Heathcliff and Kathy's soul connection and obsession, which could be simplified to just being love, but I think it's so much more than that. It is love and hate in equal regard because they see so much of themselves in the other person. Some of what they see is the stuff that they don't like about themselves. So it's love, it's hate. There's specifically a quote at the beginning where Lockwood is describing Heathcliff where he says that he will love and hate in equal regard. And I think that that is a perfect description of the relationship between Catherine and Heathcliff because their actions are just driven by equal measures of extreme love and then also extreme hatred for not only the other person, but mostly the people around them that have kept them separated. So to me, simplifying it to a love story is just a total misrepresentation of the tone. The novel is a dark, gothic tragedy, while the movie is a horny romance with moody lighting. Still trying to figure that one out. To me, this movie could have been anything. It didn't have to be Wuthering Heights. It was clear that they weren't concerned with making it Wuthering Heights, so I don't know why they didn't just use another text, whatever. It does, however, feel a little too reminiscent of Gone with the Wind for me. The tumultuous relationship between two detestable characters, the spoiled heroine forced to marry for class and money, the tall, brooding man-child. Oh, and of course, racism, classism, all hidden behind gorgeous gowns, beautiful landscape shots. I don't want to be that guy that's too woke, but why the fuck you gonna take inspiration from that particular movie or a movie that's supposed to be discussing racism and classism? Maybe I'm that friend that's too woke, but that just seems a little crazy. I thought it was just going to be the cover, which is undeniably inspired by Gone with the Wind. Like, this is like, put them side by side. You're going to tell me that's not inspired by? You're crazy. But then I watched the movie and there are a couple scenes that I was like, oh, so we're really doing the Gone with the Wind inspiration here. There's the red sky at one part. There's that corset scene. There's a few others too. I don't think I'm too far off making this connection. And actually, since writing this script, I have actually seen a few other creators talking about this. So I will link their videos down below because they really get into comparing and contrasting those scenes. I don't really want to get into that, so I'm going to let them do that. I just thought it was necessary to point out, I understand having a connection to this movie. I watched this when I was younger too and had an absolute obsession with the dresses. They are incredible. I will never get over the curtain dress, all right? But as I got older, I started to understand what this movie was about. And I was like, oh, so that's not something I should take inspiration from. Got it. So you would think that a whole team of movie people making a story meant to critique racism would have the foresight to not take inspiration from it, but what do I know? I'm just a guy on the internet. Now to answer the question, is this movie a departure or a betrayal of the text? To me, it's honestly a nothing burger. There really isn't enough substance to critique it in such a way, and the reason I was able to talk about it so much in this video is mostly because I was drawing from the book and talking about all the things missing from the book, which has a lot of substance to it. So I guess if I'm considering the substance or lack thereof, I would consider it a betrayal. When I look at all the things missing from the story, it's really hard for me not to see it that way. It ignores so much to accomplish so little. Why?
And that perfectly leads me into talking about my next point, which is going to be the ending. So the ending. It was definitely an ending. Lots of issues though, okay? It just felt so rushed. I feel like even if I didn't know what is supposed to happen next, I would still be left wanting a little bit. It just didn't really feel like it wrapped up the story in any sort of way and just made me want more. And I think one of the biggest hindrances on a successful ending was the omittance of so many characters. There are so many characters that are just left out. So I'm going to go through character by character and talk about why I think that character is important and also would have helped the movie. Number one, Henley. Hello. So Henley is Catherine's brother, who actually is the person that contributes the most to Heathcliff's abuse as a child. So Mr. Earnshaw actually showed a lot of favoritism towards Heathcliff, and this enraged Henley and led him to be very jealous. And then once Mr. Earnshaw is dead, he becomes super abusive towards Heathcliff. And after his father's death, he also makes it a point to withhold education from Heathcliff, which becomes a big contributing factor as to why Heathcliff is so bitter. And of course, Henley does become a very abusive drunk and is actually the worst character. If we're picking who is actually the villain, I would argue Henley. He doesn't have a lot of redeeming factors that make me want to root for him, ever. So that's fun. I think it would have helped to round out the story a little bit. So going back to the deprival of education, this is something that Heathcliff is very bitter about. Understandably so. It definitely held him back and made his life significantly harder. So as retaliation, he does do the same thing to Hareton, who is Hindley's son, another character that was omitted, which this one is actually more of a bummer. Hareton is a different version of Heathcliff. He is treated as lower class. He is deprived education. He is othered by a lot of the other characters, but he still has this kindness in his heart that Heathcliff kind of lacked. So he's able to rise above in the end. He pushes himself to become educated, and against his own learned nature, he befriends and eventually falls in love with Kathy, little Kathy, not Catherine, but her daughter, who is his cousin. Yeah, that is the other thing, that if we do include the rest of the cast, there is more incest. So maybe I understand why they left it out. But you know what? You kind of forget that as you're reading. You're like, wow, joy, happiness. I'm grasping at straws here while reading this book. Let's talk about LYNDON. Where was he? And you might be thinking, what are you talking about? LYNDON was in this movie. Was he? Was he? He was not the same character at all. I just don't understand all of the changes that were made. He's supposed to act as Heathcliff's foil, and that's a very important part of his arc. He's everything that Heathcliff wants to be, but can never be. Not only looks, but his demeanor, all of that. They just play off of each other so well. But he was barely a character in this movie. He's also Heathcliff's biggest aggressor. He is the person that gets what he wants. He has blonde hair, blue eyes. He's literally everything that Heathcliff wants to be. And he's also married to Catherine, of course. That's the biggest one. This man is truly the bane of his existence. But Edgar wasn't perfect, and that's another thing in this movie. He was just so nothing. There was nothing good, nothing really bad. He just seemed just like a guy, right? But no, he is also a bit of an aggressor. In the book, he actively others Heathcliff at multiple points in the story. At one point, when he comes to his home, he tries to get him to sit in the kitchen because he doesn't see him as fit enough to sit in the room with everyone else. But also, when they were kids, there's one point where Edgar comes over to their house. He's at their home. He makes fun of Heathcliff's hair. So what does Heathcliff do? He throws a boiling pot of applesauce on his head. That's not funny, but also if someone came over to my home and made fun of my hair, you're getting applesauce on your head. I don't know what you want from me. And that being said, it was a very interesting choice to make him brown. Listen, I love diversity casting, but it should have been for Heathcliff because this just doesn't make any sense. The whole thing about he's blonde, has blue eyes, he's a separate class guy. It takes away all of that. Another character missing, Mr. Lockwood. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about that one. I'm sorry. He's just there. He really doesn't add anything to the story. Sometimes it's interesting to have an outside perspective, but whatever. The next one that I do think really affects the story overall is the omittance of the next generation. This is especially upsetting to me as the #1 Heathcliff hater. I'm just kidding. I'm not. I understand him. I think he's an interesting character, but I'm not going to justify his bitch ass actions. And that's kind of what omitting the next generation narration does. It makes him look better, and his ass does not deserve to look better. Jacob Elordi's ass does look pretty fine, but no. Back to removing the next generation. It removes the generational abuse of it all. That's a very important part of this story. And just so nobody forgets, I would like to take a moment to document some of the worst things that Heathcliff has done. So we're all on the same page here. Don't think about Jacob Elordi. Think of these actions. Let these actions speak louder than his cunty little earring. Marries Isabella for revenge and treats her horribly. Sadistically kills her dog. And if we're including in the movie, he treats her like a dog after killing her dog. What the fuck? Is that supposed to be a joke? Someone call PETA. Get their asses on the case right now. What the fuck is happening? He does also dig up Kathy's grave, remove the side of it, and then plans to ultimately have their bodies intertwined in the afterlife. So that's fun. Grave robbing. He wasn't robbing. He didn't steal. Let me steal the side of it. Does that count? I don't know if that counts. Low weird. But maybe if it wasn't him, I would think it was a little romantic. If this was like a vampire story, like I can maybe understand. Oh. He also abuses his own son to the point of him flinching in fear every time he's around him. We don't actually know exactly what happens in that, but this poor kid is terrified of him. And there's multiple people that flinch when he's around, so that's not good. We don't want to see that. He's also not at all sad when his son dies. He's like, I could care less. Moving on. He does also kidnap Kathy, Catherine's daughter, and forces her to marry his son. He fully has her trapped at his house, and it's actually very scary for her. And then she's also forced to live with this man for way too long. And yes, I do understand that he is a tormented tormentor, but I just need us to remember this because they keep on casting these hot dudes to play this man, and it smooths out all of this roughness, and all of his crimes are just forgiven. I won't forget, bitch. I'm here. But going back to the ending, it was just really boring for me. It happened really quickly and there wasn't a lot to it. It was just kind of like, okay, birth and dead. The end. Oh no, he's sad. Right. It takes away all of the things that make the ending interesting. And I also maybe can never accept another ending besides the book because the 3 tombstones is just so poetic. I'm just gonna read you the ending of the book so you could understand what I wanted. I wanted melancholy. I wanted dark and twisted. But I got the most basic bitch ending ever. Oh no, the female love interest dies tragically. We've seen it. Come on, Moulin Rouge. But it was boring compared to that. At least make it consumption. If we're gonna go full send, like, what do you mean? Come on now. But you know what? It's not meant to be the same story, so I think I just need to let that point go because they end at different times in the book. There's no way that it could have had the same ending. I understand that. So I'm just gonna read this so you can understand what I wanted. 3 headstones on the slope next to the moor. I lingered round them under the benign sky, watched the moths fluttering among the heath and the harebells, listened to the soft wind breathing through the grass, and wondered how anyone could ever imagine unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth. That's all I wanted. Close-up shot, graves, panning out slowly. It's dark, it's moody, show me some moths. It's that simple. Kill these bitches. What are we doing?
In conclusion, just kidding. I have been thinking about this for far too long. I think that I am losing my mind a little bit, but that's okay. I think I still love this book. Maybe. I don't know. When you think about something for too long, go a little mad. I think I've gone a little mad. While I have gone a little mad, I do think that I still truly enjoy this book. And I really just have to say that I did not enjoy this movie. I hate saying that. I hate being so negative. This is actually my least favorite video I've ever made because I really just like talking about things that I love. And so talking about something I hate is hard. I guess, you know what? I'm not talking about something I hate. I'm talking about something that I love that is misrepresented by something I don't love as much. I'm not gonna say hate. Hate is so intense. Let's end this finally. While I will never understand the obsession with making this movie, and I quote, the greatest love story ever told, Maybe others will. And that is something that I will never judge. At the end of the day, media is totally up for interpretation, and mine just happens to not favor this particular movie. And that's okay. That is my opinion. That is my interpretation of this text. And I'm sure certain things that I say in this video are going to be at odds with what other people think. While researching for this video, there were certain sections that I was like, should I cut these out? Because everyone online had a different interpretation than me. Everybody is going to see something differently because we all have different life experiences, and that's the whole point. So if you don't agree with me, amazing. Tell me down below. Let's fucking talk about it. That's what this is all about. That is okay. If you like this movie, I am so happy for you, and I wish that I hadn't thought about it this deeply. I did not want to drink the haterade. I didn't mean to drink the haterade. It just happened, and here we are. I hate being negative, but in this current political climate, I do think it is essential to still be critical of media while we still have it, especially books like this. Something about this story is it's always been transgressive. That's the entire point. That's what makes it good. Love and hate. There is an introduction in my particular version of the book by Daphne Merkin, which I really enjoy this part of it, where she talks about the whole love-hate relationship that raged between Emily Bronte's novel and its readers can mirror the love-hate relationship between Cathy and Heathcliff, which I totally agree with. And then she goes on to say, I would suggest that Wuthering Heights remains as disturbing now as it was then, when Charlotte felt compelled to smooth the way for its reception with her explanations of her sister's unself-conscious and almost unwitting talent. Because that is something that happened. Emily's sister Charlotte was like, girl, this is a lot, and she tried to smooth it over and say like, no, it's not that serious, it's fine, maybe she's a little kooky, but it's okay, which was unnecessary. Emily wrote this book to be transgressive. She was making a statement with this book, and it's incredible that that statement still stands to this day. Like, we still talk about this book and have so many conflicted feelings while reading it, and that is incredible. For this book to have been written nearly 200 years ago and still have so much discourse around it is truly incredible, and for people to still be wanting to make movies about it is incredible. It is seriously such a polarizing story that I could spend years and years digesting and never fully comprehending. But that's what makes it so good. It's engaging, it's thought-provoking, and it's more than just rage bait. And unfortunately, this movie was a little bit that. Maybe just for me and other literary snobs. I'm not even a literary snob. I didn't go to school for literature. I went to school for fashion. Why am I dragged into this? What happened? Who dragged me into this pit of despair?
How did I get into this mess?
But seriously, if you enjoyed this movie, worked on this movie, or have any positive feelings at all, you are totally valid. It is beautifully shot and at times can be quite witty and engaging. Please do not let my overanalysis ruin your good time. That is not what I'm here to do. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time with a much lighter subject matter. And by the grace of God, Josh Hutcherson. It's gonna be so much more fun. Bye! I think I'm gonna die in this house. God damn it, I didn't talk about the music. I can't. I have nothing left in my head. I've thought about this for too long. The music was fun. I actually liked the score. But still, nothing will ever top Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush. Drink every time I say Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush in this video. Bye.